Hi, I'm Barney with DPReview.com, and I'm here with Matt Frazer from Panasonic. So yes. Matt, let's just start by just running through what do you do at Panasonic?
Well, that's a tough question. For this kind of thing, I'm viewed as the national training manager for all imaging products for Panasonic. So I basically travel the country talking about our cameras, working with salespeople. I have a staff of people that also go in and work with salespeople as well.
So you know these things inside out?
I wouldn't say inside out, but I know them pretty well, yes.
So there's two new cameras from Panasonic that came out of Photokina. Three, if we talk about the smartphone, but we'll do that in a little while. The two main cameras are the GM5, which is this one, your new interchangeable lens camera, and
yes,
the LX100. Let's just start by talking about the LX100 because that's an interesting product for you and quite a new direction for you.
I would say it's sort of an extension of where we've been going with the LX series, sort of from the get-go, going to a larger sensor camera with faster glass. Technology has allowed us now to go to a micro Four Thirds sensor, so it's substantially larger than what we were putting in the LX series. And technology and lens design has allowed us to make a relatively small lens system to marry with that new sensor.
So I know that one of the things we discussed when Panasonic first briefed us on this product was that had the lens from the LX7 simply been upscaled to cover a much larger sensor, to cover the 4/3 sensor, the lens of that design would have been enormous.
Yeah, it might.
So
it
a
might
lot
have
of
been
optical developments.
Well, I think anybody who's seen our 12 to 35 for the GX7, they can attest the fact that it's a small lens for a 24 to 70 equivalent f2.8 lens, but it certainly would look interesting hanging from the front of this camera as you try to shove it in your pocket. So that was the lens development that we had up through the LX7. With the latest innovations we have in being able to now put aspheric surfaces on the front side of a lens and the back side of the lens, and frankly the affordability now of making the molds for these lenses, it allows us to be able to lower the price point and really go pretty all out with this. I believe it's 5 different aspheric elements and 8 different aspheric surfaces that make up this camera. And then you have 2 ED lenses. So it's a lot of really nerdy things to say, but the truth is that without those technologies, there's no way we could have made this product.
So that's a lot's changed in the past even 2 or 3 years then.
Yeah, and as we talked about earlier when we were in Germany, it's even going a step beyond just making it possible, but to make the photos look beautiful with really beautiful creamy bokeh in the background. And not seeing those onion ring circles that you can sometimes get when you have the little lights that turn into big, bokeh balls in the background. It's not just making a mold, it's making sure that mold doesn't add its own impressions into the glass as we're milling it. Those are the kind of attention to detail steps that we've taken with the LX100 that we've never taken with an LX camera before.
So you've got the X100 is, it's a fairly expensive compact camera, though it's not that expensive. You can look at it alongside, the G series micro Four Thirds cameras.
It costs less than a 12 to 35 f2.8 lens, and that's what effectively you're getting in the camera.
So who is it for? Who is the LX100 for?
Well, I think there's a broad section of people. Clearly, anybody who's an SLR shooter that is looking to have a nice pocketable camera that still has SLR quality, this is right in their wheelhouse. I mean, if I am going on vacation and I work professionally with an SLR camera, I doubt I want to carry that SLR camera with me on vacation. This is a terrific camera that's going to give you very little drop-off in photo quality versus your SLR. But I think a lot of people aspirationally want to shoot SLRs, but they can't necessarily justify the cost of the faster glass that this would have. They can't necessarily justify the larger size and bulk. So anybody who's aspirationally interested in shooting with an SLR should really give this a serious consideration because it's probably 90% the quality of what they'd get from an SLR camera with similar glass, and frankly at a fraction of the price and a fraction of the weight.
So why is, this is, to some extent the answer to this question is obvious in the sense that your G series line is interchangeable lens and your LX series is fixed. But what are the philosophical differences between those two lines, the lens mount notwithstanding?
So when you look at a product like the LX100 or LX7, they're a bit more of a throwback, point-and-shoot rangefinder-esque designed camera that is focused on getting the absolute best possible quality within its limited focal range that we give you with the camera. Whereas when we look at our G series products, you're looking at a much broader assortment of glass that can potentially pair with it. So, right away, if somebody's interested in having longer telephoto optics, the LX100 is probably not in their wheelhouse. A GX7 with our 35-100 or a 100-300 lens may be a much better pairing for them. Really, when you get into the G series, it's much more about flexibility and use for it. You know, in the case of like a GH4 as an example, that camera can shoot cinematic grade video along with doing, you know, brilliant photography. As nice as the video is in the LX100, and it is fantastic for video, I'm not going to really be able to partner this with a 2x anamorphic lens to get those J.J. Abrams styled, you know, lens flares that he's so famous for. I could very easily do that with the GH4 on the other hand.
But let's talk about video very quickly, because the LX100 features 4K video,
Yes.
but it features also a photo, what you're calling a photo 4K mode. And what's the thinking behind that?
Well,
What is that, I guess?
well, obviously, we're not the first company to realize that if you're shooting 8 megapixels for each frame, those will print pretty well. There are other companies that are out there touting this idea.
So 4K video is roughly 6 to 8 megapixels at X number of frames per second.
Right, 8.3 million pixels, up to 30 frames per second in the LX100. The problem is it's only 8.3 megapixel in a 16:9 aspect ratio. And if you plan to print those photos, you're going to have to crop the edges most likely, and then you've really lost a lot of resolution. So we know people love the fact that the LX series historically has had aspect ratio functionality that doesn't cost you your field of view. So
Yeah, without going too far into it, you can change the aspect ratio of the picture without doing too much resolution cropping.
Right, you don't lose a lot of resolution. The mountain on the left stays the mountain on the left, doesn't get cropped off. So we now can give you not only that ability to do this with photos, but we can also now give you the added resolution of the height of that 4:3 image. So we can take you to effectively, you know, it's 2,500, sorry, I know you're going to check me on this, it's 2,495 pixels tall instead of 2,160 tall for a cropped out 16:9 image. To make this real simple, it means every picture you take, no matter its aspect ratio in this camera, you still get an 8.3 million pixel image. So it's going to print nice.
So you're specifically aiming this 4K mode at photographers, stills photographers.
That was our thought. It is starting to grow a life of its own for video as well that we didn't expect to see. But yes, it was primarily targeted at photographers, primarily targeted to give people 30 frames per second in a 4:3 aspect ratio that you can grab any one of those frames and have them be ridiculously sharp. Some videographers are finding a use for it with anamorphic lenses. For those of you who don't know, anamorphic lenses take and make everybody look skinny and tall, and then you stretch them out, and then it looks like CinemaScope, where it's got a 2:40, or in this case, a 2:66 to 1 aspect ratio. So people are now beginning to take that 4:3 sensor, pair the camera with a mountable 2x anamorphic lens, and they're starting to shoot anamorphically with these cameras as well. It's very interesting, actually.
So we'll talk about the GM5 in a minute, but just quickly staying on the LX100. We've used this a little bit now and published a gallery of samples earlier on this week from it. Among some of the feedback we've had from our readers is they're not too happy, they're not too keen on a JPEG rendition of the camera. I mean, would you say this was a camera for raw shooters? Is that the demographic you're?
Well, I don't know how up to date the firmware is in the sample that you've been sent. Version 1.07 would be our most up to date version. We have made some changes to the photo quality in the JPEGs that may look better on the version 1.07. I think anybody who's shooting at this level of quality will certainly appreciate being able to work with a RAW file and manipulate it the way that they see fit. You know, they may not appreciate how we handle noise reduction versus how they would choose to handle noise reduction. They may not appreciate how we evaluate white balance versus how they would evaluate white balance. And frankly, sometimes people feel our cameras are a touch overexposed when they take photos. They don't go under, they tend to go over. And so having that raw file to be able to bring back your overexposed images, I could see where that would be beneficial.
Do you tweak the, just out of interest, do you tweak the profile from the LX to the G series? Or is it the same JPEG pretty much?
That is an engineer's question, unfortunately. I don't think that the image quality is the same with this as what I see from the GX7. I would say that they appear to have subtle changes in JPEG profile. And that would make sense because the sensor itself is not using the full 16 million pixels of the Micro Four Thirds sensor. So there would have to be some adjustment made just for the sensor, just for the pixel density differences.
Great. Well, let's talk about the GM5 really quickly. And it's your smallest, by far, I think, it's your smallest interchangeable lens camera.
Well, the GM1 is slightly smaller because it doesn't have a viewfinder.
The GM5 doesn't replace the GM1, right? It sort of sits above it in the lineup.
They'll stay in the line together.
It offers an EVF. I mean, how do you get that much camera into something that's only this size?
Well, I can't say the joke we normally would because I'm on camera, but it's Panasonic magic, I guess, is what we would say. I think it's important for people to understand that, there are cameras this small that are interchangeable lens. They just don't have a sensor that's that big in this camera that's this small. I think it's important for people to see also that when you compare the LX100 to the GM1, it's actually smaller than the LX100 actually. So one of the areas that we had to really innovate here is the shutter mechanism that's in the camera. Typically shutters are spring-loaded, and the benefit of that is they're incredibly fast. They can certainly do their job effectively. The problem is they're also very big when we do that. So we had to innovate using a stepping motor solution, which that could be a whole show on its own as to how it works. But it allows us to make an 80% smaller shutter mechanism that still allows us to expose the imager without having to use just a straight electronic shutter, which is something we wanted to avoid doing because as we use electronic shutters, all of a sudden we start to get skew and rolling shutter issues that show up that are by and large eliminated by having that shutter in there. Aside from that, we had a flash in the GM1, and unfortunately we had to remove the flash when we put on the viewfinder because, well, we have a choice. We can either have a flash or a viewfinder. So we ended up doing a hot shoe instead. But that's one area that we've saved a little room, is that we don't have a flash that has to retract back into the body. Other than that, it's really just technological innovations that have allowed us to downsize the image sensor. So the Venus engine in this is different than what's in this camera. It's not a 4K capable image Venus engine, whereas this one is. But for most people, photographically, they're never going to notice the difference.
So the first generation, the GM1, was marketed kind of as a lifestyle accessory in a way. It was fashionable, it was fun, it was friendly, it was tall, it was small, you could put it in your pocket. The changes in the GM5 seem much more oriented towards enthusiasts. Is that because people, were you surprised by who bought the GM1?
Was I surprised, or were other people at Panasonic
surprised?
Let's start with you. I was not at all surprised that people who take photography seriously had an interest in the GM1. It's a huge sensor camera in a really compact body. Who wouldn't want to shoot with something like that, even if they shoot an SLR professionally? It's an enabling camera. It's amazing how many people ask me, when are we going to have a live HDMI out and something like this so they can fly it on a drone for professional work on a camera this small. So I wasn't very surprised by that at all. I think it may have caught some people by surprise that it was taken more seriously as a camera. I think that the viewfinder really enables it to be much more useful, especially, I live in Denver. We have like 300 sunny days a year. Believe it or not, we do.
Lucky you.
And since we have so much sun, a viewfinder is almost mandatory for us to shoot where I live. I don't know that that's necessarily a serious photographer feature. I think anybody who lives in a sunny environment will appreciate having that viewfinder.
So we talked about one environment, of course, where sunny environments are precisely where phones become rather difficult to use, but I'll use that segue and talk about the CM1. I mean, this is the smartphone that you're releasing in Germany and France for now.
Yes, Germany and France.
It was announced at Photokina last month. I mean, this is a big deal. This is a 1-inch sensor camera in a smartphone. I mean, talk us through the philosophy behind that, the thinking behind that.
Well, I think, unless you live under a rock, maybe you do, people are using these things called smartphones to take pictures.
Really?
Yes, they are. And we as an industry can either insist on educating people on why they should be using these, or we can try to adapt these devices to fit into the digital lifestyle that exists today. And we've been working toward much more efficient apps to be able to connect to the device, much more, concentrating on maybe removing passwords that don't need to be there when you're connecting these devices. But realistically, the only way to be as efficient as possible with a smartphone is to have the camera integrated into the smartphone. And so this is a camera first and foremost. That was its focus. It's a 1-inch sensor, it's 20 megapixel, it's like a lens that's f2.8, 28 millimeter field of view equivalency, and it happens to make phone calls. It'll shoot in RAW, it will do manual aperture, manual shutter, you can have manual ISO control. So you're getting a proper 1-inch sensor camera that you just happen to be able to make phone calls from, and you can go ahead and play Candy Crush on if you chose.
So you put it that way around. It's a camera that has the phone capabilities, not the other way around.
It's a camera that plays awesome video games. I mean, it really does great video games that you can download. Plus, it happens to also make phone calls. Yes, that's really the way to look at it. I think it's important to note that Panasonic is really attacking the smartphone market from two completely different angles with a product like this. You can take an LX100 and you can shoot remotely by controlling it with your smartphone, which is great, and you can do really cool things with it that you just can't really do with a smartphone, by trying to position it someplace else and then control zoom. You just can't. So we have that functionality built into the cameras. We've been praised for having a very well executed Wi-Fi app for a smartphone, and we've gotten better by offering things like QR code access, so you can just scan it with your smartphone, and we're working to get rid of passwords because no one's trying to break into your phone. Why have a password for a web key? But on the other end, we know people still want to use a phone.
Some people might disagree with you on that.
Well, I don't think that's probably not a conversation for here. But I think on the other end of the spectrum, for somebody who absolutely wants a phone first and foremost and wants it to have the best possible camera that they can produce, this is the option that we're kind of attacking from both ends.
Great. Well, thank you. That was a very interesting overview, and I look forward to. I know there's a limited availability of the CM1, but I look forward to getting hold of one and seeing what it can do. Well,
Yes.
thank you, Matt.
Hey, thank you, Barney. I appreciate it.
Thank you. That was interesting, and thank you for watching.